Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to PsychoBible, babbling about psychology and theology. So this is going to just be a landmark video because I want to just thank everyone who's subscribed, who's been watching, who's sent me emails to encourage me, who's commented or shared my videos or reached out to me in some way. Thank you so much for your support. I hit 100 subscribers earlier in 2020, somewhere like in January or February, and that was a big deal to me because it is so hard for channels like mine to grow. I'm not politically correct, but I'm also not one of those channels where I'm just talking about politics and social commentary, just doing hot takes in order to own the libs and get a lot of views that way. Like I'm actually trying to do thoughtful videos and bring in some parts of the discussion in the culture war and in the meaning crisis that we're all dealing with right now that is pretty much neglected. Um, Originally, I started my channel because I was inspired by Jordan Peterson and the whole so-called intellectual dark web that had emerged in being inspired by him and his taking a stand for free speech. And of course, it was centered around the whole transgender, transsexual, sexual identity, gender identity issue. And so it started to spark some hope in me that we can begin to talk about these forbidden topics more. And I also started to try to connect to some of the figureheads in this movement. I got to go to see Jordan Peterson speak when he was in Philadelphia, and I also got to meet Jonathan Pajot when he was in Pennsylvania, and actually meet him in person and film one of his lectures. And so he used my footage for one of his videos. And then I did an interview with Paul Vanderklay, but he never posted it. And I had hoped that the whole IDW, intellectual dark web, was opening up a space for discussion on controversial subjects. And I wanted to put that to the test by seeing if the most forbidden topic could finally receive a fair shake. And that forbidden topic is what everyone else calls conversion therapy, but it's really just therapy, just counseling, pastoral care for people with unwanted same-sex attraction or gender confusion. Why are we not talking about this? If we're going to talk about gender, we'll talk about the transgender issue. We'll talk about gender differences between men and women, and there's a critique of feminism going on right now. Okay, should that not be opening up the door for us to have a serious conversation about this counseling that is being attacked left and right, to the point where you could lose your license if you practice it in some places, or some countries are outright banning it? And we're all about talking about free speech right now. Why are we not talking about this? So I wanted to introduce that to the discussion, and I was inspired by someone like Paul Vanderklay, who just does low budget production. He produces so many videos, an hours of footage. His videos are usually at least 2 hours long, and he's doing interviews, discussions. So that's why I wanted to do an interview with him, I wanted to have a voice in this intellectual dark web. And I'm a nobody, but I wanted to see what I could do, because what you're seeing with this whole intellectual dark web thing is it's mostly all the liberal scholars and academics, intellectuals, now becoming disillusioned by the left because of how non-scientific it has gotten, and the discourse it's fallen into chaos. So to be able to talk about things intellectually has been threatened. So you're seeing all these sort of exiles from the left now engaging for the first time with some moderates and libertarians and conservatives. But what we see is most of the people involved in these discussions are just still secular and not religious. The few people that are in this so-called intellectual dark web that are actually religious would be like Ben Shapiro, an Orthodox Jew, and at the lower levels of the IDW, you have some people like Jonathan Pajot and Paul Vanderklay, but they're not getting a whole lot of notoriety. So the main ones who are getting the most popularity are still very much the atheists or the agnostic types. And so I also wanted to make a contribution from a Christian counseling perspective, which I'm still growing. I just want to be one who will get discussions going. That's why I say my channel is babbling about psychology and theology. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm learning a lot, and as I'm learning things, I want to put out there what I am learning, what I do know, but also there's some videos I put out there just, hey, here's some of my thoughts. I would love to get some discussion going. Yeah, here's a Christian psychology, a Christian counseling perspective on this topic. What do you guys say? So I wanted to join into that discussion. But it's been so hard to grow this channel because, well, the tech overlords are really cracking down on anyone who is heterodox, who has a worldview that is not in line with the progressive ideology, with the pro-LGBT, pro-feminist, intersectional ideology. And that's not me. And also, even on the right, they'll question the transgender issue. They'll question feminism, but they won't. It has become you cannot touch the homosexual issue, and I'm not even necessarily coming at it very hard. I'm just trying to offer intellectual takes on it and very well grounded biblical perspective on it. So it's been very difficult to grow this channel. So that is, like I said, and if you watch my channel, homosexuality, gender issues, those are not the only things I talk about. But it's still likely the reason why my channel is getting suppressed or shadow suppressed in some way. I've had even some friends tell me that my videos even come up as restricted. And odd considering that I never curse or use graphic content. But I've just kept at it. And I hit 100 subscribers earlier this year, and I'm trying to put out a video a week, and that's tough because I have so many video ideas, and I just can't get to them as quickly as I would like because I'm working like 4 jobs at least right now. I'm working at 3 different counseling practices at a university. I have some of my own private counseling, private practice clients in addition that I squeeze in. So I'm definitely working full-time in the field now. So I just don't have the time to do all the videos I would like to do. But I'm trying to just be faithful and put out content that I'm really thinking through, and just I want to get people's gears turning. I don't want to just say things people already know and agree with. I want to say things that make people think. And so I've kept at it, and now I've just recently surpassed 200 subscribers. And that feels pretty good. So to commemorate this landmark, I figured I would do a sort of Q&A video. I have some questions submitted by email, and then we'll get to some lost comments. Alright, so I got one from Ralph. He's been commenting on some of my videos, and he sent me an email. Let me read it here. I just wanted to recommend you watch We're Here, episode 3. I haven't watched more than about 5 or 6 minutes. The setup is there are 3 drag queens that go to towns in middle America, mostly rural, and they work with 3 people to have them try drag, and in the process address some area of needed healing like broken relationships or estrangement in the family. The 3rd episode has one of the guests who has unwanted same-sex attractions, and he believes his faith demands that he resist those attractions, and his mom, who does not share his beliefs, has a son who also struggled when he was younger, and now her other son, after getting to a point where he embraced his sexual orientation and has since been convicted that his faith is incompatible with endorsement of same-sex sex. I'm not sure where they end up and all, but I thought it was perfect for your vlog or vlog, and that you would have an interest, as it is a rare attempt to somewhat respectfully represent those who are working to manage unwanted same-sex attraction without adopting and reconciling to an identity as gay. So I have not watched this documentary yet. I let him know that sounds like a good video idea. I'll try to get to it at some point. So I'm curious how they present things. And I've seen a lot of videos where they do try to interact with ex-gays or people who struggle with their same-sex attraction, and they usually find easy prey. People who have very little support, who are very ambivalent about their chosen direction, and so they can pick them off, and they're not as secure in their position yet, and so they'll come in and make them question everything. So I have a lot of doubts that they treat this issue very fairly. That's my own bias going in. So here's the video where I sort of prep that at some point I will watch this and probably do a commentary video. So we'll see. Once I do that, watch it and make that video, we'll see if my suspicions were true. I will try to be open-minded. I'm just letting you know at the start I have my suspicions about the way they might edit it, or how fairly they treat the people who aren't aligning with their own agenda. Just being honest with you guys. Okay, I got an email from another regular viewer. I'm not going to reveal his identity. And I emailed him back, but I figured this is a really interesting email exchange, so I'll share it with you guys as well. Alright, so he says, as I told you on the YouTube comments, I had same-sex attraction and even lived gay-identified for a few years. For about 2 years, I have been experiencing intense opposite-sex attraction and almost no SSA, same-sex attraction. To be frank with you, I've been struggling to keep it in my pants with girls right now. As a Catholic, I don't believe in the lesser evil. I don't want to simply exchange one sin for another. Do you get what I mean? I want to get married. In your opinion, how can I know if I am ready for this? Is there anything that I should observe in myself before getting married? I would like to know what you think. The big question to me has been if I am ready to take on a marriage. So here's what I wrote him. Well, I appreciate his question and his email and for him just being so honest with me. And then I said, I don't know you well enough to comment on whether or not you specifically are ready for marriage. Are you in a serious relationship, or have you had a lot of short, casual ones? And that's sort of how he was making it sound like he was being a bit promiscuous, but I'm not sure. That said, here are some basic suggestions. From guys I know who've experienced significant attraction change, they describe it as going through puberty all over again. Having opposite-sex attraction isn't criteria enough for marriage. It just sort of brings one to the same place as guys who've always had OSA, opposite-sex attraction. Now the key is practicing chastity and learning how to relate appropriately to women. Therefore, even a heterosexually married man must master his desires and body. Of course, we do not reach perfection in this life, so accountability and mentorship are needed throughout all of life. Okay, I'm a big proponent of that. That we are continually growing, and we always need someone who's just a step ahead of us. As a coach, as a mentor, an accountability partner. So that's just in general. I don't care what your background is. Okay. All right. So I recommended a couple things. Make sure you have at least one man, preferably someone without an SSA background, with whom you meet regularly for accountability. You have to be painfully transparent for it to have any benefit. And I recommend studying Theology of the Body. I just finished my series discussing various issues from a Theology of the Body perspective. So I recommend studying Theology of the Body and other teachings about the callings of men and women. It's not just about developing opposite sex attraction, but it's also growing more and more secure in your masculine identity if you're a male. if you're a female, growing more and more in your feminine identity from the inside out. And so you feel more and more like a man among men, but also that you really have a significant and deep understanding of your calling as a man. Like, what is true masculinity? Not just the stereotypes, but an understanding of what it means and what God has destined us for as men and as women, if you're a female. So I recommend check out books by Christopher West like Fill These Hearts and Good News About Sex, Love, and Marriage. And also check out Fully Alive by Larry Crabb, which gets into a biblical view of masculinity and femininity that goes beyond stereotypes. So I hope all of this is a helpful start. Feel free to continue the conversation. So hope that might be helpful to some of you as well. Someone else reached out to me and asked, can you do a video about the Save James movement? This is referring to James Younger. Okay, so if you haven't heard, there's this ongoing dispute that's been going on for the past year and a half, 2 years, maybe longer, I'm not too sure, between a dad in Texas, Jeff Younger, and his ex-wife, Ann, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's a weird last name. And it's regarding, they have 2 young twin sons. Now, technically, they are not biologically Ann's children because they use an egg donor. So they're from Jeff's sperm and an egg donor. And so biologically not theirs, but legally they're both their children. Anyway, they're divorced. They're twins. You got James and Jude. At some point, I forget the details of how it all began, the mother got the idea that James is transgender. Now, he might have been exploring gender nonconformity in some way and was testing out different cross-gender play. Maybe he was trying on mom's dress, and mom just took it and ran with it. That's, I think, from what I heard, it was something very innocuous, something very innocent that the mom just encouraged. And so mom started enrolling him in school as a girl named Luna. And so the dad has been fighting against this. And the mom was able to get it to the point where the dad has to pay for all this counseling for his son, who now he goes back. There's some conflicting evidence about whether or not James really has any gender confusion anymore, at least. There's been times where there's a Save James website or Facebook page where they put out the updates. And when he's with dad, he's wearing boys' clothes. He loves engaging in typical boy-type play. And then this is affecting his twin brother, who's just stressed seeing all this that his brother's going through. And it's crazy what's been happening. So the court has gone back and forth. It reached a pinnacle last year around October, where the dad was trying to fight for equal decision rights, say in the well, let me read. There's a bit of a timeline here. October 2019, Jeff wins the right to have complete 50-50 conservatorship. This differs from custody. Conservatorship is the right to make decisions on behalf of your children. So he won 50-50, so that means that they both have to agree on the decisions for their kids. Anne previously had complete control over the children's medical and psychological care, which allowed her to, without intervention, take James to multiple therapists who taught him that his body was wrong, since he felt like a girl. Judge Kim Cook's ruling allowed Jeff to challenge Anne and vice versa without one parent dominating the other. Judge Kim Cook's also orders Jeff and Anne into family counseling with the goal of Jeff receiving 50-50 custody starting by January 2020 or June 2020 at the therapist's discretion. Alright, so let me skip ahead. November, James chooses to go to school as himself for the first time, so not as Luna. So we see he's not fully identifying as the opposite sex. There's some ambivalence. And there's enough evidence to show that I think if he was out of his mom's environment, he would identify just fine as a boy. But they're screwing him up in so many different ways. December 2019, Kim Cooks, the judge, is recused from the case, but her ruling remains in place. A big win for James and Jude. The case is handed to Ray Wheelis, a conservative Republican, who then hands the case to Judge Mary Brown. Okay. January 2020. Okay, now Jeff is required to go to counseling, and this is crazy. It just gets insane. Like, all right, let me keep going. So the ex-wife, the mom, continues to fight for sole conservatorship, and keeps like trying to get rid of whatever judge gets assigned if she doesn't like that judge, if they're conservative or just have plain common sense. It just gets crazier. So, March 2020, James goes to school in full-out boys' clothes. Again, this is always his choice. James constantly tries to copy Jeff's way of dressing. James and Jude are picked up by Anne, who texts Jeff that she is returning the boys' clothes and that the boys do not want Jeff to attend an open house. She's trying to exclude them from their father or isolate them from their father, and she's just obsessed with, or I'm probably going to get in trouble for this video probably, but she's got an agenda to turn her son into a girl. And both parents are under gag orders, which is unconstitutional. It's ridiculous. So people have to speak on his behalf or on the boy's behalf. So the dad had to stop. He was running the Save James website, so some friends took it over after last year's ruling. We had a good judge in there. We got Ted Cruz got involved in making a decision. I have some friends in Facebook who are also friends with Jeff Younger, so I'm constantly hearing updates about this whole situation. Okay, June 2020. This is where things got real crazy. In a stunning turn of events, Judge Mary Brown suddenly orders Jeff to do, this is crazy, the amount of money spent on this transgender therapy, $5,000 to $7,000 per month. I cannot understand who can justify charging that much for counseling. That's insane. Now the thing is, she makes this ruling without actually having a hearing. There was a hearing scheduled, and it gets canceled, but she still makes a decision. It's just a travesty. Additionally, she rules that in order to protect the therapist from reprisal, Jeff cannot file a complaint to the Texas State Board of Examiners. In order to do so, a hearing must take place, and a judge must approve for Jeff to fight the therapist. So he can't even potentially make a complaint about these therapists who are encouraging his biological son to identify as a girl. And what's crazy is all of the push to encourage a boy who is still showing ambivalence, if anything, probably if anything now he's more identifying with his own biological sex, or just his true sex. But there's such a push to encourage this transgender issue that we are almost forcing it upon this boy. For the sake of being prudent, the judges should be supporting anything that helps in at least the typical or traditional wait and see model. So anyway, will I do a video on this? I'm not sure. There's a lot to it. I'll have to research more. So probably at some point I will. I got several videos I want to get to, but this is an urgent one, so I did want to address this in this video. So keep praying for this situation, praying for James and Jude, who's really distressed seeing what his brother's going through, and Jeff as well. Like, the amount of money he's required to put out there for this, I wouldn't pay a dime. This is insane. So I'd rather be in contempt than to pay for something that is going to ultimately damage my son. All right, next question here. This is from Joseph. This is a pretty recent one because it's like, Andrew, I'm glad you've continued your Theology of the Body series. I have a suggestion for a future TOB episode. What would be considered licit and illicit foreplay? As in, like, fellatio, cunnilingus, anal... I'm going to get I'm getting in trouble for saying all these names. I'm hoping you can address this issue, as I'm sure no one else is. Thanks again for the great work you're doing. And I emailed him back already an answer, but so here's what I told him. I'm like, well, at the time I was wrapping up my TOB series, so I just couldn't get around to answering that. That's one I'll have to give more thought. And most likely, this is probably where I might diverge a bit from the more traditional Catholic teaching on this, because I would say the more consistent TOB point of view would be that the only valid form of sexual activity would be intercourse, where the man is giving the seed and the wife is opening to receive, and there's no contraception involved. And that doesn't just mean prophylactics, but it could mean even spilling the semen or doing anything that is preventing the seed from entering the woman. Okay, so that's my hunch. I would have to do a little bit more research to give a more thorough answer to that. There's a lot of nuance with that. So what counts as foreplay? Some of that stuff, I'm like, that doesn't... Fellatio, anal sex, like, that's not foreplay. That's still a sexual act. So I guess it really depends on what you mean by foreplay. Once you start engaging the genitals, I don't see that as foreplay as much as that's an actual sexual act. I had to explain this to one of my clients just this week, who was telling me that, he and his girlfriend, now this is a guy, he's in his 50s, and he's in recovery for sexual addiction, and so he's said he's been sexually sober with his girlfriend. He's been seeing off and on for like 10 years. But then he said, well, we still do stuff. Like, they might not have had intercourse, but they still do stuff. I'm like, okay, so what do you mean? Well, it turns out they do heavy petting, and there will be ejaculations. And they might not get naked, but they're still engaging the genitalia, and they're working themselves up. Like, well, what's the purpose of the heavy petting? Something else actually that I'm going to take from Cy Rogers. One of the things he said when he was at our church doing his seminar was, when we say making out, and you're really necking, and you're getting all steamy, what is that? What are you doing? Like, what we're doing, and when we just have this rule, well, just don't have intercourse. As long as you don't do that, then you're still sexually pure. Well, one, that, especially when we tell teenagers that, or people with sexual addiction that, like, that's like telling them you can do everything but that, but you're setting them up to fail, ultimately. Because what is all that heavy petting and making out doing? That's foreplay. So you're driving yourself right to the edge, but then you're telling you, don't cross that line. Well, you got the train going. You can't just stop on a dime when you've got that train going like that. So you're setting yourself up to fail, and then you deal with the guilt, the outcome of that. So it's just not a wise course of action to engage physically with your bodies in such a way that it will lead to such intense arousal. Now, that said, like I told my client, you should have a hard time. It should be difficult to keep your hands off your partner, your fiance, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean that gives you license, but the point is, there should be attraction and some passion, but like it says in Song of Solomon, don't awaken that passion until the right time, until marriage. So we need to learn to sublimate it somehow. And this is the danger we get into when we have these long periods of dating, and we put off marriage, and then we have a long engagement, and we expect people to be sexually pure, or we expect ourselves to be. Well, when we don't prepare our youth to take on responsibility as they're going through the teenage years, so that by the time they're out of high school and out of college, or in college even, they're now emotionally ready and they're not in terrible debt, they're in a position where they could reasonably get married soon, so that they don't need to put themselves in a situation where they're going to be sexually tempted with their boyfriend or girlfriend for an extended period of time, and they got to now suppress those God-given desires for their partner. Like, it should be there. You need to learn how to develop restraint and self-control, but there should still be some difficulty with doing that. Like, it should be that you really want to engage, but you have enough control you're not going to. So it's not just an on and off switch. So when we keep putting marriage off, but what we're gonna do with our modern society, where we've separated the body from the soul and the spirit, where now you can do with your body whatever you want, and no, I'm still a Christian, I'm still fine. Well, no. What you're doing then is you give yourself license to do whatever you want with your body, or your bodies. So you're setting yourself for sexual sin. Alright, now time for my lost comments. Several months ago, I transferred my videos from my personal account to my brand account, PsychoBible. In doing so, I lost all the comments I made under my personal account, Andrew Rodriguez. So if you're new and were watching old videos and saw comments that seemed like one end of a conversation, that's why. Now, I knew I was going to do that before I switched over to the brand account. So I first took screenshots of all those conversations because I was thinking maybe I'll go and retype all my responses. But then I thought, maybe that'll look kind of weird. Some person that I was maybe having a dialogue with or a debate with months ago will now get notifications of me responding to them. So I'm not sure. Maybe I still will. Maybe I'll delete some of the comment threads so it just doesn't look confusing. But if you want to know what was said, here we go. In my video, The Truth About Ex-Gay Ministries, going to Restored Hope Network Conference 2018, I had a couple of responses there, and one of them was Sleep the Mouse, where he said, "Where can I get conversion therapy?" So I explained, well, I use the term tongue-in-cheek because therapists who help people with unwanted same-sex attraction don't actually call it conversion therapy. But anyway, if you're looking for counseling for this concern, the best places to look are Restored Hope Networks and the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice and Scientific Integrity's websites. So that was my answer. I'm probably going to add that back in. I get some comments that I just don't even bother replying to, mostly when they just have something stupid to say. In my video, LGBT and Gender Non-Binary Through an Honor-Shame Lens, there's this one guy, he kind of gives me some constructive criticism. "Hi there, I know you are right and talk logically. Because I want you to spread your knowledge to more and more people and to people who need it," I'm assuming that's what he meant, I suggest you talk in a way that is more interesting and attracting." So I replied, "LOL, I appreciate the constructive criticism. It would help if I don't do my videos at 1 a.m. And that's just the reality. Like I said, I work about 4 jobs and also have my own other clients on the side in addition to my other practices I work at. And so a lot of times I don't get around to doing my videos until way late at night, and I'm drained. So it's hard to come off as enthusiastic as I would like. So, but I appreciate him pointing that out, and I try to do my videos earlier in the day after that. Alright, this was the one that generated quite a few responses. Therapy for unwanted homosexuality / same-sex attraction. This is when I was speaking at the human sexuality class at the university where I counsel. So there was this person, Kay Stevenson. I'll probably add this response back in there. Very good. Thanks for sharing. I've been wondering what the state of reorientation therapy since the death of Dr. Nicolosi and the political upheaval that the movement has had to endure. So I responded, Dr. Nicolosi was quite hopeful that the tide would turn, but the attack against us has just been increasing. But I sense a growing backlash as seen in the Freedom March and Changed and Once Gay movements. When you tell people they cannot change or are not allowed to pursue change, you might get the opposite response from what you intended. I like that response. Okay, so that brings us to this exchange back and forth I had with someone by the name of ES. He claimed, I have a non sequitur at the 10-minute, 5-second mark. The study, taking your words for it, showed not that gay men didn't have higher rates of comorbidity with other pathologies than their heterosexual peers. It showed that gay men, whether in treatment or not, continued with similar comorbidity outcomes. So I replied, you seem confused. The study by Evelyn Hooker, this was a study that was done very early on in the gay activist movement to try to depathologize homosexuality. And so Evelyn Hooker did research that showed that, well, let me just read my comment. The study by Evelyn Hooker was to show that gay men in treatment had no higher rate of pathology than gay men not in treatment for their SSA. Her assumption was that homosexuality could be a disorder only if it was comorbid with other serious disorders. Since she couldn't find high comorbidity, she concluded gay men are well adjusted. He tried to say that that doesn't make sense. I haven't read that study, but if it is how you present, her point was that treatment was ineffective, not that gay men don't suffer higher levels of comorbidity with other pathologies than heterosexual men. If she wanted to show what you claim, her control group would be straight men, not other gay men not in treatment. And I'm like, well, I'm certainly not defending her methodology, but her aim was to prove that homosexuality is not a disorder, not to show that therapy for SSA is ineffective. This guy continues, the success rates for changing one's orientation are very low. I agree with a commenter on one of your other videos. If practitioners of reparative or conversion therapy would put their fees into a trust fund, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, that could only be accessed after years of the client experiencing long-term successful reorientation change, then the moral hazard would be reduced. So I'm like, yeah, of course, the rates of complete... Okay, so I reply, yeah, of course, the rates of complete categorical change are very low, just like treatment for most issues. Good thing that's not what's being offered and definitely not guaranteed. See my video on the ineffectiveness myth. So at this point, I had already done my series debunking the different myths about so-called conversion therapy. And I had done the myth about, oh, this treatment is ineffective. So I just directed him to there. So he continues trying to argue with me. Good luck then. Don't oversell. You don't know what crosses are given to individuals for the edification of themselves and others. Because he's trying to say that having same-sex... He seemed like he was perhaps a Catholic who considered his same-sex attraction a cross he must bear. But also, he didn't seem like he was pursuing chastity as much as trying to embrace a gay identity. That's how it seemed. He didn't come out right and say that, but based on some of his responses and how offended by the idea of attraction change he seemed to be, I was getting that hint. Anyway, so my response is, you won't see proof of me overselling anything. My job is to dispel myths about counseling and advocate for the rights of clients to obtain the therapy that aligns with their values and goals, and the rights of therapists to offer such counseling. That respects client self-determination. Then he says, great. Also, please honestly present studies, what they show, and don't cherry-pick results just to bolster conclusions you want to be true. It will improve your credibility. And I was like, I'm not going to bother with this person for a bit. So I didn't respond to that one because I already I've already been presenting the data accurately. He just didn't understand it. And then he tried to add this. One final comment, only 2 words. McCrae Game. Now, McCrae Game was the former director of Hope for Wholeness. And then he decided to embrace homosexuality after years of leading that ministry. And so I know plenty of people who are familiar with him. I didn't know him very well before the big controversy of him coming out as gay again. And I just like, oh, please give me a break. I'm like, bah! I just give him a big laugh. Oh, wow, you've just knocked down all my points. Give me a break. Now you're just being a troll. Here's what Hope for Wholeness says, and I linked to their response. And basically, there had been a lot of problems with McCrae Game prior to him leaving the ministry and then deciding to embrace homosexuality. And he had a reputation, apparently, of being anti-therapy and counseling. So he never really used more of a counseling approach, used more a moralistic approach to helping people with same-sex attraction, which is not an approach we advocate for the most part, in any of the counseling circles I'm in. If you just like tell people don't act out and white knuckle it, that's not helpful. So I think that was the gist of the Facebook post by Hope for Wholeness that I was linking to. Bottom line, I was just like, Game's fall says nothing about the field as a whole. Talk about cherry picking, because this is what happens. I can name dozens of former homosexuals, some ministry leaders, some just living quiet lives or doing other work. And what will they do? They'll just be like, well, what about this person and this person? And I'll name several, maybe former ministry leaders, people who used to say they're ex-gay, but now they've gone back to embracing homosexuality, and act like that now disproves all the others. Like, no. People can relapse. They can go and change their worldview, their values, and go back into a view of themselves and behavior that they previously had sworn off. Happens all the time, not just homosexuality, but any other issue. It doesn't discredit those who have experienced change and who have decided to abandon everything for the sake of the cross and for pursuing the lifestyle that is meaningful for them. It's not just a religious issue. It's people have a right to explore their heterosexual potential and to enjoy a monogamous heterosexual marriage and have children naturally, if that's their desire. So they may have to wrestle against some same-sex attractions that might pull them the way that's a direction that's against their own goals. And some will be willing to have that fight for an indefinite period of time. And others will want to, I want to resolve those desires, those unmet sexual longings, and or those unmet relational longings that contribute toward these same-sex attractions. They should have the right to obtain that type of counseling. But of course he goes on. He said that he only had 2 more words to end this conversation with, but no, he continues. It's just weird that if the therapy is so effective, why so many who've devoted their entire careers and being to the endeavor end up renouncing it. Like Mr. Game, Exodus International Senior Leadership, meaning like Alan Chambers and Randy Thomas. I was like, what do I care about them? Like, that doesn't... Once again, you can name a bunch who've returned to homosexuality. I can name a bunch who have continued in their either celibacy or in their thriving marriages with their wives, or what? Haven't rescinded or haven't returned to their old ways. Okay, we can both play that game. So I said, not so weird when you know the commonalities of those who fall away. Not to mention the senior leadership of Exodus and John Palk never did therapy themselves. They had conversion experiences upon coming to Christ. They leave homosexuality but didn't continue in the personal healing process. And then I linked to the interview I did with Stephen Black from First Stone Ministries, where we got into some of the dynamics about why some go back. And he replies, it is weird, and highlights that orientation change very rarely happens, and pursuing it can cause harm. The negative stigma of merely having an unchosen orientation is what needs to change. And I feel like I'm just being a dead horse here. I'm like, yeah, complete categorical change is rare. But that's not the point of counseling, and that's not promised. Again, watch my video on the ineffectiveness myth. Stigma is a loaded word. You would have to be more specific before I would respond to that point. But once you give him more information to look into, he just responds with, no thanks, I'm happy encouraging chastity without making people feel guilt for an orientation they didn't choose. But you do you. I'm like, I'm not causing guilt for having the attractions. If you're in support of chastity, then why do you continue to straw man our position? Everything we promote is nested within chastity. So he says, because I've watched your videos and noted how you cherry pick and misrepresent. And I don't want the negative stigma that you seem to embrace regarding the mere possessing of a homosexual orientation to carry on. Your refusal to acknowledge your misrepresentations further convince me you've made this into some unhealthy obsession. We should start with the premise that each and every one of us is marred in various ways by concupiscence and sin. I place more faith in the sacraments to help us overcome those than therapy. When one mixes morals with what is presented as therapy, it should be met with suspicion. Priests, and parents to some extent, should deal with the moral dimensions. Therapists should stick to the medical. It is not clear that homosexuality itself should be treated medically. My response? I haven't cherry-picked or misrepresented anything. I have already addressed your accusation of cherry-picking, and you apparently ignored it. First off, my video is to Christian college students. It's a given that we are all imperfect and have sin struggles. I don't waste time repeating what's already understood, and I feel no need to qualify what I say when it comes to this subject like so many others do. The fact that you misconstrue what I say to somehow conclude that because I'm explaining the counseling options for unwanted same-sex attraction that I must be obsessed with the topic reveals more about your own bias than anything. If you have unwanted same-sex attraction and you're content using the sacraments and pursuing chastity, then that's great. As I've said before, we're in agreement there. And by the way, chastity is not just abstinence, but the right ordering of sexual desires. However, our field is about openness and pursuit of all that the gospel offers, forgiveness of sins, as well as transformation through the lifelong process of sanctification, through healing and progressive submission to God's will. By His stripes we are healed. And why not offer counseling? Counseling is a psychological, relational aspect of discipleship and pastoral care. And when he's been defeated, all he does is retort, sure, hun, tell yourself what you need to believe. I think we have no more to say to each other. Again, for your own soul, please don't defraud anyone. Be well out there. Oh, the ignorance. It astounds me, the level of arrogance that accompanies ignorance. As I just said, and have fun continuing to beat that straw man to death. I'm sure you'll chime in again at some point, but if it's more straw men, I won't engage. Bye for now. What do you know? He does come back. He's like, one more quick comment on the evaluation of the APA task force. You highlight the health risks associated with gay male sexual activity. Should you not also point out that lesbians are the cohort least at risk for contracting STIs. My response: that's plainly obvious that lesbians are at decreased risk of STDs. However, they are at an increased risk of other things, such as breast cancer. Also, in general, historically, most research on homosexuality has been on gay men. And then his strange reply is, it is still disingenuous to only highlight the negative high STI rates of gay men. Lesbians are less likely than straight women to contract STIs, so we should promote lesbianism. I'm like, no, why on earth would we promote lesbianism? Do you hate humanity so much you want to see it die off? Lesbians are at a decreased risk of STDs compared to promiscuous straight women. Yes, of course, we know that women can be victims of a promiscuous partner, but that doesn't change the fact that the safest version is always a committed, monogamous, heterosexual marriage. And I had deleted one of his responses, and I edited my reply to address his point. I'm like, try again without using ad hominem, because what he did was just call me an idiot. That's your only warning. Do it again and I block you. I'm just gonna delete him. His comments are stupid. I had one guy reply, Tres Adames. Oh no, I've read almost every single one of these books. He's referring to the books that I mentioned when I was talking about the therapy options for unwanted same-sex attraction. Please don't make the same mistake I did and believe that homosexuality can be cured, in scare quotes. I wasted 10 years of my life reading these books and went through conversion therapy, even reparative therapy, from state-licensed therapists. I don't know why he puts reparative therapy in quotes. It only led to more shame, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Okay, so here's my response. Hi, I'm sad to read that was your experience. I actually personally know or met most of the major clinicians and researchers in this field. None of them promise a so-called gay cure. No more than any therapist claims to have a depression cure or addiction cure. If that's indeed how counseling was marketed to you, my suspicion is you saw someone very incompetent and unethical. I have a very realistic outlook on therapy for unwanted same-sex attraction and the type and degree of change that is most likely. But even with the rarity of categorical change, that does not diminish the benefit that such counseling has given plenty of other clients. And your negative outcome does not discount the positive outcomes of so many others. Ultimately, counseling is just a tool that God can use to aid in deeper self-understanding and empowering individuals to make healthier, godlier choices. Regardless of the degree of attraction change one experiences, the conviction to embrace homosexuality or not is up to the client. And then he says, what about Joseph Nicolosi? I've read his books and I've seen him speak. He was pretty confident that he could diminish same-sex attraction. Yeah, of course he was. And I responded, yeah, he was pretty confident, but he never promised a cure. He always said the common outcomes are a third no change, a third significant change, and a third complete change. That was more anecdotal, but there's been research showing that if change in attraction occurs, it's on a continuum. And then he said, I remember reading that in his Shame and Attachment Loss book. I would still argue that his work has done more damage than good. So he's actually read the work. And he knows what he's saying. He knows the truth of what he's saying. But he's still going to say it did more harm than good. And so I'm like, on what basis? And his basis is my own experience and the experience of other people I know who have gone through the same treatment. It does make me wonder why you defend these authors so much when there are much better resources that would still affirm a traditional view than these. And I don't know what better resources he means. But once again, we're just going in circles here. So I didn't even bother with him, I think, after that, because I'm like, I already explained to you your experience is not necessarily representative of everyone else who's done Nicolosi's genuine approach. There's a lot of people who claim they're reparative therapists but never studied under Nicolosi or use his actual approach, which is really integrative. It's based off a combination of different trauma-based and addiction-based approaches. So it's very comprehensive. Some of the lost comments I'm just going to add back in because they were actually very useful responses, and they were more friendly conversations. Some of the others were just these debates that went on way too long and the person would not listen. So I'm just going to probably delete them so you don't see the one-sided conversation. So anyway, if you come on my channel and just try to insult me, I usually will ignore you. I'll leave it on there. Sometimes YouTube will flag it and ask me, do you want to allow this to be posted? And I don't mind the hate. Go ahead, you can post it. It's stupid, but hey, a hate view is a view, and a hate comment is still a comment, and that might boost the its presence in the algorithm. I don't know. But also, I got thick skin. You're not going to bother me. I've got people who, because I work in this field, try to make the assumption that I must be a closeted homosexual myself. I mean, that's just silly, but, you know, whatever. Think what you want. So, I might fight back sometimes, usually with a smart remark. Depends on my mood. But if you have an actual criticism or rebuttal, I try to respond. Sometimes I'm slow to respond because YouTube doesn't always notify me of the comments and replies, but once I get around to it, I'll try to be active in the comment section. So, hey, whether you're just coming on my page to argue, or if you actually want to dialogue and discuss some topics more in depth, I really appreciate all the comments. That's why I started the channel, actually, because I really just want to get some conversation going about topics that no one is talking about. So, anyway, this has been my 200 subscriber roundup, just looking over the history of the channel. I don't get a lot of views, but it's still a pleasure to me. I don't really do it for the popularity's sake, and probably once I do get more popular, if I ever get popular, that's probably when I'll start getting more censored. But I know I'm being suppressed to some extent. But hey, I do it for the few that are hungry for my content. I've had several people contact me and just are so happy that there's someone talking about these issues. One guy actually said he kind of likes that there's not a whole lot of subscribers. It makes him feel like he found something special or secretive or exclusive. And, well, I'm glad he sees it that way. But I hope I just get the gears turning for some of you guys. And really, it's not just about addressing homosexuality, but what I want to do with my channel is, especially with the videos I was doing on theology of the body, is to get to the core of these issues that we're seeing in our culture, whether it's the LGBT and gender confusion, the riots, the social justice stuff, is really get to understand what is a biblical response, and not just a response, what's at the core, what's been missing. So I don't want us to just be reactive to all these things going on, but hey, here's the message that we should have been teaching all along that could have prevented so much of this confusion we're seeing in our society. The loss of meaning, the loss of understanding of our sexuality and what it means to be human. And so that's why a lot of my emphasis is on going back and reclaiming your true masculinity and femininity and a true understanding of what it means to be human, the marriage of heaven and earth. There's so much richness in our faith that has not been properly communicated, and not just to the culture, but to our own churches. There's so many Christians out there that are crazy. What I mean by that is they believe they're not what they are. They believe they're something that they're not. And they don't understand who they really are. That's craziness. So I ultimately care about identity. So some of my videos coming forward in the near future, they're going to be getting into more about culture, as well as resilience, how we need resilience to deal with a lot of the, the turmoil going on right now. But also, I'm going to get into more about identity and addiction. So I got some things I've been learning that I just want to disseminate as much as possible. So I got a lot of things on the back burner that are coming to the forefront soon. So thanks for sticking with me and sharing the videos if you do, commenting when you do. Please, if you've just been poking your head in here every now and then, what's stopping you? Hit that like button, subscribe, tap that bell for notifications so you'll know when I got something new and you can join in the discussion. Anyway, here's to the next milestone. Let's shoot for 500 by, I don't know, say spring 2021. That would be awesome. If we can get to 1,000 by the end of 2021, I'd be ecstatic. But maybe those are low goals to you, but in this climate and with the work I do, that's pretty reasonable. All right. Thanks for joining me. God bless. See you next time.